Good afternoon and welcome to the Orange County School Board's work session, which has been scheduled for today for the purpose of discussing the following school board policies: B, school governance; BBG, board elections; BDC, board officers; BE, school board meetings; BEC, executive sessions; BEDH, public input at school board meetings; and BIE, executive session. Board member insurance liability. The public will not have an opportunity to participate in this work session to provide public comment because this is not a regularly scheduled school board meeting. No action will be taken, and there will be no pre-agenda period in which the public normally addresses the school board on germane topics that are related to school board work. The public will, however, have an opportunity to provide input at future rule development workshops on these rules and policies and subsequent school board meeting. Board members are attending in person or telephonically, so I'll take roll call orally. Member Gallo?
Present.
Member Lopez?
Present, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Member Cobert?
Good afternoon, Chair.
Vice Chair Gould?
Present.
Thank you. Member Felder?
Present.
Dr. Castrodental?
Present.
Member Byrd?
Present.
And likewise, I'm present. We have everyone is present and accounted for. Let me point out that our vice chair is not physically in the room, so I'm going to ask the board's support in doing what we have done in the past and designating our prior vice chair, Member Cobert, to serve in the event that I need to excuse myself for any reason. Are we in any objection to that? Seeing none, then so be it. I actually hope that as part of our rulemaking process that maybe we adopt that as our acting practice moving forward, so that we don't have to do this each time this comes up. With that, let me take a moment for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. As we embark on the moment of silence, I think it's important for us to reflect on the extraordinarily unusual times that we live in, the enormous amount of pain and suffering we have as a nation and as a world have experienced this last year. For those of us who haven't been touched directly, I think it's sometimes easy to not recognize the enormous loss, the pain and suffering of family members who have lost their loved ones and haven't been at their bedside, those that have died alone, those that have needlessly perished. And so I will take this moment, as I know my fellow board members will, to hope and pray that this next year we will do everything humanly possible as leaders in this community, that our governments will work, that our community will all work together to get everyone vaccinated as quickly as possible, and to do our parts to stay safe and to wear our mask and to get through this together, and to come through this together. So with those words, let's stand for a moment of silence and then the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Dr. Jenkins, we'll turn this meeting over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is the actual work session we've set aside for going through your policy B around school board governance. You had drafts of these previously, and actually Council Eileen Fernandez, Associate General Counsel, actually did a previous introduction. However, that seems like a year ago, and it was actually last year that we started this. So I'm going to ask her to start again as though we are just embarking on this on these policies and the revisions. These are the policies that direct how the board governs, which is the responsibility of the school board, and largely driven by policies and laws from the state of Florida. That being said, I think it's important to have a clear understanding and for the public to be able to reference those policies for a clear understanding of roles. And so it's a good time to work through them and make any adjustments as Associate General Counsel has made some of the statutory adjustments. It's a good time for the board to have discussion around these policies as well. With that, Ms. Fernandez.
Thank you. Good afternoon and Happy New Year to everybody. Today, we're going to be going over a portion of your B policies, which mainly cover board governance and operation matters. You have a total of 13 policies in the B category. We're only going to be reviewing 7 of them today, and then we'll come back to you with a part 2 with the remainder of them. I'm going to start by giving you an overview of the policies that we're going to be covering today. And then I'm going to review the changes that staff is recommending, and after that's done, we can go to question and discussion unless you want to interrupt me in between if you have a question. So as the chair had previously indicated, we are going through 7 policies. This is the list of the 7 policies that we're going to be reviewing today. We'll start with policy B. Policy B is the longest of your B policies, and it covers a lot of information. It's divided into 11 different subject areas, and those are listed right there in that slide. So this policy provides the purpose of the board, which is to ensure that OCPS achieves appropriate educational goals within the budgetary parameters, and it holds itself accountable to the citizens of Orange County. It contains the board's focus and its governance of the district. It also has the job description, which includes being the link between the district and the public, to monitor the district's performance, to select the name for schools, and to approve charter schools. In addition, it goes into a little bit of detail on the role of the chair. It also discusses the creation and operation of committees that are established by the board. The policy also requires the board to set an annual agenda to fulfill its statutory obligations. It has a member code of conduct and possible consequences if a policy is violated by a board member. And it includes the procurement blackout period language that we have in another policy. Policy BBBG covers board elections and only has one section, which is labeled membership of the school board. The policy contains provisions on the number of school board members that we have on the board, the terms for the board members, and how vacancies are filled. Next is policy BDC. Policy BDC discusses the organization of the board and its officers. The policy states that the chair is elected as a district-wide representative, that the vice chair is elected by the board yearly during a reorganization meeting, that the chair presides over these meetings, and it establishes the superintendent as the secretary and executive of the board. Next, we go to policy BE.
I just can't read it.
Policy BE has specific information on how pre-agenda and regularly scheduled board meetings are conducted. The policy contains provisions on how school board meetings are scheduled. It also has the process for scheduling special meetings, including advertisement requirements. It states that Robert's Rules of Order are to be used for conducting meetings. It contains quorum provisions. It contains a process for tie votes by stating that the chair casts the deciding vote in the event of a tie. And it contains provisions for taking and keeping minutes of the meetings. Next is policy BEC. This policy focuses on executive sessions. It provides a definition for executive sessions, which are those meetings permitted to be held outside of sunshine. They are permitted for litigation, safety matters, and collective bargaining. And the policy also states when those executive sessions can be called and by whom. So it's your board attorney that can call an executive session for litigation, and it's your chair or superintendent that can call a meeting for collective bargaining and or safety matters. It also defines who can be present at those meetings. It includes board members, appropriate staff and advisors, and the school board attorney. Policy BDH is, I think, the very anticipated policy by y'all. It has been discussed by several board members at our different meetings, and it is because it contains the rules for public input during our board meetings. So the policy establishes a time for pre-agenda when public comment is permitted and also during pre-agenda, and then also during the regularly scheduled meetings. It contains rules on time limits for public speakers. It requires public speakers to comply with a code of civility, and it contains a list of prohibited topics that speakers may not speak to during the pre-agenda public comment period. This policy probably has the bulk of the changes that are being recommended from staff, and those changes have been made as a result of listening to your discussions in your different meetings. And then the last policy is policy BIE. This is a very simple policy that addresses liability insurance for board members, and it simply says that it authorizes the board to purchase liability insurance for its members. So if we have no questions on that, I wanted to move to the red line. So hopefully you guys all received the red line from yesterday.
Madam Chair, just one intervention, because I realize we have a new board member. So it used to come up regularly while we had these alphabetical namings of policies. I was in Charlotte back when this wonderful tradition started. It is a national database of board policies in groupings, so that you can cross-reference and look at other districts across the country who have adopted the same, sort of like what's the name of the Dewey system? Very similar to that, so that you can cross-reference. But I remember the great pain and agony over this system, and our attorneys used to call it the heebie-jeebie, because all of the different letters that are put in place, and we make fun sometimes of certain letter combinations. But it actually is, Member Felder, a national database that can be cross-referenced when our attorneys and staff are trying to see what other district policies might be in place. Not every district, but several adopted this system, hence the... Yes, yes. Just failed to mention that for our new board member. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Member Felder, for asking that, because I've been here 2 years and I've been trying to figure out why in the world they... Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And perhaps, moving forward, we could keep those because of the value of the uniformity across districts, but maybe we could also have a parentheses that uses layman's terms to describe them, that would benefit the public and even board members from time to time. So, thank you. All right. Yeah. And can I take a moment to just clarify one thing also that was said? I know the board members know, but in case the public is watching, the establishment of the chair as an elected-wide position, and the idea that the chair casts the deciding vote if it's a tie vote, these are statutorily determined. This is not something that this board adopted. It's not something that has anything to do with the individual chair. I just wanted that kind of on the record, because I know that sometimes people may think that the board itself decided on this arrangement. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. I did want to add about the coding system. That is actually contained in the policy we're going to bring to you in part 2. And we didn't want to bring those right away so that we could do a little bit of research to see what coding systems there are out there. And if we have a recommendation for you, we will bring that to you at that time.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure. So before we start going through the red line changes, I do want to just kind of point out that some of the changes that I made on here, or that we made on here, are global changes, so I'm not going to go through those individually. So just to give you an example, one of those is defining the board and capitalizing the word board throughout all of the policies, so that it's consistent throughout all of our policies. And then in addition to that, there were several sections or several policies and several areas in the policies that included the word assure, and it should have been ensure. So we've gone ahead and made that change throughout the document as well. That's probably not reflected in the copy that you have before you, but we made those changes today, and I didn't want to send you yet another version for you to avoid any confusion. So we'll start off with policy B. As you can see on that first page, the majority of the changes are, again, changing it so that we have a defined term for board. And then in addition to that, going in and updating some of the legal authority that you have for passing and adopting these policies. If you want to move to page 2, again, These are global changes, changes to the word board, and then we will be changing one of the assures in here to ensure as well at the very bottom of the page. Page 3, once again, global changes for board, changes and updates to the legal authority that allows you to adopt these provisions. And then we have a couple of assures in here as well that we will be changing. If you go to page 4, that is, once again, just global changes there and updates to the statutory references. Page 5 is also the same thing. And I will say one other thing that we changed in here globally is throughout the document, throughout the policies, it either said chair, chairman, chairperson. So we have now changed it so it's consistently chair throughout all the documents. That makes it just for consistency and simplicity purposes. Page 6 of the policy, again, same thing, global changes, nothing in particular there that I wanted to point out. The first area where I wanted to point something out would be page 7, where we added provision G, which says that committees shall operate in the sunshine in accordance with Florida statutes. So we wanted to add in there that, any committees that you set up have to comply with sunshine rules. Again, updates to the statutory authority on there. And then if you want to move on to page 8, this is where we have the committee structure section. What we did here is we removed the names of the specific committees, so that allows you to form a committee whenever you think it's necessary for the operation of the district. It didn't make a lot of sense to just list those 3, especially since in past practices you have created, or other boards have created, other committees. And so we wanted to make sure that we were encompassing anything that might be able to come up in the future. So again, what we've done here is just to eliminate the 3 categories there, and then just basically says that you can establish a committee as you see fit.
Ms. Fernandez, if you can hold it for just a minute. I'm sorry.
How are we queuing?
Great question. I am so sorry, Vice Chair. We're going to use the same system that we had used in the past, which, the most recent past, which would be to send the text to Amy with a Q in it.
Okay.
And let me recognize that Member Felder has a question. And I'm also going to ask the board, if you have questions for clarifying something, this would be the time. If you want to add or suggest changes, let's take that up as soon as Ms. Fernandez is done, and we'll take that up probably page by page. And I know I have a number of questions and comments, and I expect and kind of hope everybody does, because this is our opportunity as a board. So let's hear from Member Felder, and then I'll look to Miss Amy, Miss Anval, for any other board members that want to be recognized now. Ms. Felder, Commissioner Member Felder.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, when you said something about the development of committees, so because I know some things that may be characteristic of our district in terms of needs may not necessarily be with other districts, and you said that we are sort of following statewide kind of procedure. So suppose that happens, will we be outside of the sunshine state laws if we decide we need a committee for specific kinds of things that may not be characteristic or akin to other districts in the state? As you said, some out here, policy committee is a committee only if its existence and change come from the board, and its work is intended to support the work. So I just want to make sure, because sometimes we may have to start a committee.
Right.
That we need to act on quickly. You know what I'm saying? So I need to know what's the procedure, what's the protocol of this.
So your protocol and your practice would not change from what has happened in the past. And just to explain what's happened in the past is if we've had an issue that has come up, and an example I can give you, for instance, is during the pandemic, we had this health committee that we had established. And so the board at one point decided that they wanted to have an advisory committee out there to, look at data, talk to staff, and then come back and give recommendations to the board. So that's really how it happens. It's not anything super formal. It can be done, somebody brings it up during your discussion portion of the meeting, and then you can come back and vote on it during the next meeting. No, ma'am. As long as it's done, during your regularly scheduled board meeting, and you have advertised, once you do come to form that committee, you have that advertised in another agenda item, you are completely within sunshine law.
All right, and we have Vice Chair Gould wants to be recognized. Vice Chair?
I can wait till the end because mine is about a substantive change, so we
Okay.
can get through and then come back.
Wonderful, thank you. Ms. Fernandez?
Okay. If you want to go over to page 9 of policy B, this one is titled the annual agenda planning. A lot of these changes came from superintendent's office, and what these changes were done, they were made to reflect our current practices. What was in there was a little outdated as to how we actually operate. And so the changes that were made in here are reflective of our current practices. For instance, if you look at, section C, where it talks about throughout the year, the board will attend to consent agenda items as expeditiously as possible. All questions about consent agenda items will be discussed with, and it had very specific emailed, fax, or voicemail. Obviously, now we have different forms of communication, and so we wanted to make sure we weren't limiting you as to, what you could accept as far as communication is concerned. Let's see here. Pages 10 and 11, again, have global changes on them. Also page 12. And then once we get to page 13, one significant change we are recommending here is to eliminate the portion that was titled Board Members' Conflict of Interest. The reason we're recommending the elimination of this is because it's already covered under policy KCE in a much more thorough way. And so we didn't think you needed to have repetition in your policy. So it's covered by your lobbying policy already. Page 14, once again, includes global changes and changes to the statutory authority. And then at the very bottom of that page, there is another section to policy B that's labeled procurement and purchasing. We are once again recommending that this be eliminated because it is already covered under KCE. So that's it for policy B. The next one that we have is policy BBBG. And for policy BBBG,
Ms. Enval, sorry, Ms. Fernandez, why don't we stop at policy B?
Okay.
And take input from the board on that policy before we go on to the next policy?
Sure.
Okay, so we are on policy B. And Ms. Enval, do you have?
I believe you're queued up next, Chair.
Pardon me? Okay.
You're queued up next
Well-
to talk unless Vice Chair Gould wanted to go.
Vice Chair Gould,
I did have a comment on this policy.
go ahead.
So my only thought is I love the idea of making the committee outline more flexible, but there are two committees that I think are essential each year, and that's legislative and budget. Communication kind of ebbs and flows. And budget is actually joint committee work with the unions. So I'm not sure that we should eliminate calling those two out. I'd like the opinion of my fellow board members on that.
I concur. Other board members?
I
A
concur.
general concurrence, I think. I don't see anyone who disagrees. Vice Chair?
That was it for me.
Okay, well, I was going to start from the beginning, but while we're on committees, let me raise one issue that I had some concerns about. We have some fairly strict rules for how committees can behave, and they pertain to all board-created committees. And I think Cove is a unique board from the standpoint of the board appointed, but statutorily, I think not statutory, I think by the referendum, I think we're committed to that, and I think that their role would appear to violate some of the policies for a board-created committee because of their recommendations, the direct involvement with the staff. So I would ask that we find a way to differentiate Cove from the other board-created committees. Dr. Jenkins is nodding in the affirmative. And perhaps it's as simple as saying, an exception that Cove is not a board-created committee, although it's appointed by the board, would be, I think, helpful from that standpoint. The other, starting from the beginning, right from the beginning, and I don't know what page this is on, probably on page 2 of yours, governance style. It starts with the board will govern with an emphasis on outward vision rather than internal preoccupation. So I think I know what the goal of this was, but I think if I'm a citizen and I read that, or the people that voted for me, I think if they saw this, they would say, we actually elected you to be preoccupied with what's happening internally, not with what's happening and when I see outward vision, I hear outside of the district, the vision outside of the district. And so I do agree that the board should not be preoccupied with the daily operational decisions. I completely agree with that, but I don't think this language says that. And so I would like to suggest that we either eliminate that sentence, that bullet, or find another way to say that, because preoccupation sounds like a bad word, but I do think we have an obligation to focus inwardly on this district. That's what we were elected to do. So let me just stop there and take comments or feedback from board members on that issue. Or just, I agree it's problematic, or I think we should stick with the language. Give me something, guys. Okay. Okay, I hear Member Castor-Dental, Member Byrd, agree. Member Colbert, you want to comment? Or you?
I agree that this sentence probably doesn't have the connotation we're looking for. Are you looking for more of a global vision of the school district, something along those lines?
Yes. Yeah.
I would concur.
Yeah. The next is the next to the last bullet, that we're supposed to focus on the future rather than the past or the present. This is less of a concern, but I think the present is how we get to the future. And again, I think that a lot of this was developed in response to a situation at a very different time with the way the board was acting. I'm guessing this went back to Susan Arkin's initial governance, and she was trying to correct an ineffective board. And so I don't disagree that we should be focusing on the future rather than the past, because it's helpful to know what we did in the past, but we can't spend time dwelling on what we did wrong. But at the same time, I'm not even sure that that's necessary. That's my 2 cents on that one. Feedback?
concur.
Okay.
I agree. And I think there's lots of contradictions within these bullet points. When you talk about internal preoccupation and then proactivity rather than reactivity, how can you be proactive if you're not looking at the past or the present or future, and if you're only looking at external operations? Those contradict each other within those bullets.
So again, I would be comfortable with just taking out that next to the last one. And as I looked at more detail, I kind of almost felt like this would have been something that a policy committee, maybe, because I've got so many wordsmithing issues, but words matter. And the context today versus the context in 2000 are very different. Member Colbert?
I think they should sound more proactive. I don't think they should have the rather than statements, because I do think that is correcting something from the past.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, having a global vision, having our focus be visionary, et cetera, but the rather than statements don't have a place in policy.
So, Ms. Fernandez, you're taking notes on this. Thank you. Ms. Enval, you have a speaker?
Yes.
We do have a board
Vice
back there, just so you know. If that, it
Yes.
would be easier for me. I'm betting it is Member Gould? Because Member Gould is the only one on the phone. Member
Good
Gould,
guess.
yes.
I just wanted to put in my 2 cents. I concur with both of that. Member Colbert said exactly what I was thinking. And obviously our dog agrees as well.
Yes,
with this.
fully. Yes, yes.
But it should be more on the proactive side, and that, COVID was a perfect example that we not only had to be reactive and support the superintendent and the current, but be proactive in how we're going to address the future. So, I think we need to just maybe put some more support language in there too, in essence, that we govern and support those things that we put into policy without interfering.
Without interfering in the operation, the daily operational. Yeah, I agree. That would be, I think, more
Correct.
consistent with what we believe our role, effective role to be. On number 4, under accordingly, number 4, number 2, self-discipline just needs to be capitalized on that. But number 4, the board will allow no officer, individual, or committee of the board to hinder or be an excuse for not fulfilling its commitments. I don't disagree that we shouldn't do that. I'm just not really sure that this needs to be in a policy. I could think of all kinds of things I wouldn't want to have happen. Member Colbert?
I agree. As we read over these, and we can probably go back and look at the dates where these were last revised, it does seem that the board who established these policies was trying to rectify some situations. But as in the previous discussion, these should be proactive statements, and this one is not. We want to, in policy, state what we want to be, not what we do not want, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And as I'm pointing these out, I also do want to be mindful that while I think we have an excellent board right now, I know from my own experience over the years that today is not always a predictor of tomorrow. So I know that some of this is put in there as a way of being able to point to a board member who maybe doesn't understand. So I do think it's important that we do establish roles and they be clear. But, okay, I do wish I had the same page numbers. Under the chair's role, G. Okay, conduct timely board meeting debriefings, which I think that the superintendent and Ms. Enval and I debrief on a regular basis over what did we cover, what do we need to cover, what went well, how can we be more effective in making sure material presented to the board is understandable to all involved. But it goes on to say quarterly self-assessments to ensure process improvement. I'm not sure that's ever been done on a quarterly basis. I think if it said routine or periodic self-assessments, but I don't know, am I supposed to do a quarterly report to the board on how I'm doing as chair? Okay, well, then we might just want to take that part out. Sign all contracts authorized by the board. This is I. This one is really important to me because if something were to happen and I were to be hospitalized for a couple of weeks, which could happen in the middle of COVID, God, knock on wood that I said this, but not that I'm superstitious, but I think that we need to be able to delegate that to the vice chair or another member of the board if the chair is unavailable, because sometimes we do have documents that even when we're all away for holiday that may have a 48-hour turnaround we didn't know about. So if we can modify that, of course. Like you're going to be unavailable for a minute?
Yeah, for a minute.
Okay, absolutely. Well, we're talking about being unavailable. Member Colbert.
I agree, Chair. In the past, when I served in that role, I did sign documents. in the absence of the chair, but I agree with you that that should be in policy.
Now, K does say, so I says appoint members for board committees. K says the chair may delegate this authority, but doesn't describe which authority. So I would hope that the delegation of the authority is attached to the signed contracts, just for clarity moving forward, because it's a kind of a big deal. Signing contracts and documents is really an important role. And if we have a policy that says that if Member Colbert signs it when I'm away, or Vice Chair signs it when I'm away, that that's not a permissible use of their power, then we could have a contractual contest. Yes.
Would you be comfortable if I placed a additional provision at the end that says, in your absence, the vice chair would fulfill the role of the chair, or something to
Yeah.
that effect?
Yeah, and the one thing, when we talk about the role of the chair and then the role of the vice chair, I think we also need to be mindful that we could be absent a vice chair, and then who succeeds that, and which is where I'd like that succession to either be that the board votes on the next person to chair, or it goes to the previous vice chair. I think that's the easier thing, that it just keeps regressing to the previous vice chair. I don't know where that gets put into here, but I do think it would be highly beneficial for us to have that. This year has taught us that.
Chair, if I may, the
Member
only issue
Gallo.
that I have with it going to the previous vice chair, that previous vice chair may no longer be on the board.
Absolutely, which
So
is why it needs to go to the vice chair before that vice chair.
So then we would go to the previous?
Sure, absolutely. That's the point. I think the language needs to say it just keeps going. And at some point, if you get to the point where we've had a wholesale clean out of the board and there is no vice chair, then at that point, the board needs to elect somebody at that meeting. So you'll get that, that's gonna be fun wording that, but, all right, under the, I think we're still board committee principles. One suggestion I would make in most of these, C, D, we say board committees. E is board committees. Under F, we say committees will be used sparingly. Then we say committees under G shall operate in the sunshine. I think it's really important that if we're gonna say board, that we need to definitely say board on G, because the superintendent has committees that do not operate in the sunshine. And I know this is all about the board, but just for clarity, either we get rid of the term board committees and we clarify that these are all board committees, or we be specific on those. And I think that's specific authority, board members' code of conduct. We're not there yet, right? Have we gotten to board member code of conduct?
It should be included in B, yes, on page 10.
It's still B? Okay.
Mhm, yes.
Okay, this is a big one. This is under Board Members' Code of Conduct. It's 1A, and it's support board decisions. And I know we've had a little bit of conversation around this at one of our maybe executive meetings. I don't remember which one. Regardless of individual dissent, once the board has made a decision, individual members will support the decision of the board. So before I tell you what my concerns are, let me clarify that I have always believed that it is the board, not an individual, who has power. I've always believed that there is no person on a board. Orange County government role is different in that the mayor is the executive officer. But the legislative body, none of us have any power. It's us collectively. So we had a situation where there was a lawsuit, and the majority of the board members supported one position. We got sued over it. One board member didn't support it and was literally going to go testify against the board. I don't think that's appropriate. I think that you need to support and acknowledge that that's a binding decision that's been made. What I'm troubled by is that I've also been in situations at times where I felt very strongly that I didn't agree with the decision, and I don't think that any of us should lose the ability when we're talking to people to say, the board made this decision, it's binding, I respect that decision. I personally did not agree with it. These are the reasons I didn't agree with it, but the board has spoken. I think that is appropriate, but this makes me feel, it calls into question whether you can say that, whether you can say, I disagree for the following reasons. And I'm kind of troubled with the idea that anybody loses their constitutional right to say what they think and why. So probably of everything that I have had trouble with, it's trying to figure out how do we balance that. And then I know what it was. It was some sort of an issue with a lawsuit, and I remember there was a discussion if we were subpoenaed, what were we going to say? And if you're in a lawsuit and you have said things at the board meeting about what you think should or shouldn't happen, you can't turn around and pretend you forgot. So does anybody have some advice here for how, or is this just something we need to gnaw on? I'm seeing nodding of head that everybody has some concerns about it, but I didn't come with a clear answer.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Dr. Jenkins.
So a couple of things come to mind. First, you are absolutely correct, and I actually was still in Charlotte at the time that these were put in place, but a large number of them with a consultant were constructed because of board member behavior and trying to make sure they were in the lane of governance as opposed to actually trying to do handle operational matters. And so under that, there were issues with board members publicly, I believe, in opposition to decisions that had been made. In fact, I think we did have a board member who was subpoenaed to testify against the district because of that outspokenness. And so it was an attempt to corral that kind of behavior under governance and also to reinforce that the board as a body makes decisions, not as individuals. And so I would submit that we can probably, and I love what you said earlier, this board understands governance, but you can't guarantee there won't be someone in the future who needs that same corralling. And so that board members can help correct other board members' behavior, you need something in policy. I don't know that this language probably goes a little bit beyond what was necessary. I think the notion that any public statements have to make sure that you are identifying your own personal opinion while also acknowledging the board's decision has been put in place. And so we can work on some language like that. I think it doesn't have to go quite as far, but I love your comment about 10 years from now, none of us are still on the board or still, I hope we're around, but maybe not with OCPS. And there is a board member or a couple of individuals who sort of cross that line regularly. You have to have policy in place in order for board members to manage and correct each other. I think we can get some language for you.
So, thank you, Dr. Jenkins. And then under Roman numeral 2, the last sentence says, the bottom of it says, let's see, it's all one sentence. Although board members are obligated to register differences of opinion on board issues at the board level, individual members may not direct their differences of opinion in a manner which would create polarization on the board. Agreed. In the organization or community. Agreed. Or undermine the decision of the majority of the board. So let me give you a specific example. And I wish Member Gordon were with us right now. Years ago, you all will remember I had championed the charter amendment dealing with school overcrowding and taking the Martinez Doctrine and actually codifying it into our charter. Shortly after that, there was a parcel of property across from the convention center, a large piece of land. Yeah, I won't mention who it's owned by, I don't need to do that. But anyway, a large parcel of land. The city was considering annexing it, and the county knew the city was looking at annexing. The county said that that property wasn't subject to the charter amendment because it was grandfathered. So, grandfathered, I have two attorneys here, Ms. Fernandez and Ms. Enval, who will understand that grandfathered can be kind of a squishy definition. And it was my opinion that the county went way out of the normal lane of defining what grandfathered is in order to say it wasn't subject. And it was a huge amount of property. It was going to have a tremendous impact on Tangelo Park. And I was, I believe, the lone vote in opposition, which meant that I did not have standing to reverse the decision unless I could demonstrate there was new information. I discovered some new information that had not been shared with the board by the administration, and that's when I learned that there was an underlying issue that that the property owner was quietly threatening the county that we'll annex into the city, and this whole thing doesn't apply to us when we're in the city. So I think this was before the charter amendment, and we just had the Martinez, and that was the big loophole. So the county wanted to just find a way to keep this property. And I, to this day, I wrestle with the tough decision that the mayor and his administration had, because they realized we're not going to get a school no matter what if it goes to the city, so let's do the best we can. I, on the other hand, was very married to this principle that we're still not going to do something that we promised we're not going to do. And so I then found some new information and brought it back to the board with a motion to reconsider. I also reached out to Member Gordon because it was her district. That's how her and I first really, started working together. And ultimately, we got a school site because of this. And so I kind of undermined the decision of the majority of the board, but just by bringing it back and saying there's new information. The rest of the board wasn't mad at me when I brought it back. They supported it. So what I did was I followed the right protocol. It did gain media attention. You got Tangelo Park, you got a big developer, you got the convention center, you got the city, the county, a war, everything. It's just made for TV movies, right? So it did get their attention. That wasn't my goal, but at the end of the day, we got a school. We abided by the practice that we had implemented, and it all came out well. But I look at this language, and this is the thing, when I see that and I look at this and I go, would I have been in violation? And I feel like I would be in violation of this. So I share that also with Dr. Jenkins and the rest of you as you're drafting it, to have that context. I know I got a reputation for being a troublemaker at the county, but I didn't look for trouble. I looked for good policy, and occasionally when it became difficult, it looked like trouble. And I want to make sure that board members here are empowered to ask tough questions, and if they see something that nobody else sees, that they still can come back and say, I've got new information, I've got to share this with you, and not be in violation of any policies we've adopted. Because if we don't have that freedom to be independent, we're not going to do our jobs, and the public isn't going to trust us to do our jobs either. So we can't, I don't think we can tie our hands so strongly that we limit our ability for legitimate reasons to raise issues. Member Castor-Dental.
I appreciate your explanation. And I have to say, this policy allows us to be, one, with the board decisions, but your explanation just explained why we need to still have that freedom to respond to our districts and to the public. And I would not want my hands tied. I think, like Dr. Jenkins mentioned, if you say something like, this is my personal opinion, but I support the board at this, with the final decision.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might be, I don't know if you put that in policy or if that's part of our training as a board, how you navigate that. But I see the need to allow that freedom.
And as much as we have I think have an excellent rapport and a lot of mutual respect, I can think of situations with almost each one of you over the last 2 years where there's a time where if you had to say, I supported that decision, you, in your conscience, you would know you were lying. So I want to figure out how you can say, I respect the decision of the board, but I disagree, and still be able to voice your opinion on it. Because sometimes, go ahead, Member Gallo.
Oh, thank you. I agree with you, Chair, and I agree with Member Dr. Castor-Dental as well. I think you represent the entire district, which is challenging because you have so many areas. We handle certain districts, and we were elected to represent those districts, and those districts have vastly different needs. The needs in District 1 are vastly different than in Member Gould's area with all of the growth and everything. So we all bring a different perspective, and I would never want to be in a position that a policy would undermine our ability to represent our districts well.
All right, so we've got some heavy lifting for y'all to do. I think the issue is respectfully, to be able to respectfully voice our opinions without personalizing them or diminishing the respect of the board, something like that.
I did queue up on this. I don't know if it came through.
Thank you. Go ahead, Member Gould.
I agree with what you're saying. I think, though, we have to be very, very careful that it doesn't go too far, that even when we respectfully disagree with the decision, the second part of that sentence, unless we're going to bring it, well, even when we bring it back, but the second part of that sentence is, but it was a board decision and we will stand by it. Because, I will throw out a much simpler example than you had, Chair, but where I've experienced this really cutting on the edge of this policy was the high school start times. And we had a board member who wanted to change the high school start times. And every time we've brought it back, and I'm in 8 years, it's 3 times for me. And it was one time before that was a disaster for the community, but it was one person who was out there kind of stirring a pot, and really amplifying that. And I think that hurt the credibility of the whole board at one point. So I have had things that I have not agreed with in my own district that the board has done. And I feel free that I can say I didn't agree with that, but once we made a decision, we had to move together as a body to do it, unless I could come back for another reason and say, no, as you did, and brought it back to the table through the process. So I want to caution that, especially when it's people who might not be as versed in the loss of credibility for the entire board when things look like they're being done outside the board table to get their way.
Right, right. So I think your terminology about standing by the decision, I don't know that that's the exact language, but I understand exactly what you mean. And that's different than saying I supported or agreed with, but it is saying I respect and I'm going to stand behind this decision. And that's what we all need to do, unless procedurally there is a process by which you can come back and revisit it. And I remember, Gould, I know I can point to numerous times where we had one individual who brought things back like every 3 months, the same issue, and we just go through the same issue over and over again, and it was very frustrating. But I also recognize that we can put anything we want in policy, but at the end of the day, enforcing that policy, the board tried to enforce their will on me at one point, to get me to apologize for something that I hadn't really done. I talked to you about this, Dr. Jenkins, at one point. Anyway, they were trying to figure out whether to censor me or what to do. And anyway, at the end of the day, they really didn't do anything, but the flood of, I got 250 emails. I got, my office couldn't hold the flowers I got the next day. So we also need to be really, really careful. I'd love to tell you all the stories sometime. It's great story about my daughter and the inspiration that my teenage daughter gave to me. And so I think we need to be careful that we have to recognize the value of free speech. And the moment you try to rein it in, even with the best of intentions, fortunately, we as society fight really hard to protect our rights and everybody else's rights. So let's work on changing that language around. One other thing I want to mention, this is minor, and this is under board members, still under board members code of conduct. It's under it's under 2, Roman numeral 2. No board member can attend or serve on staff committees. I agree with the serve on. The only thing I would ask that we put in here, some staff committees may be sunshine committees. And I don't think we can tell a board member that they can't attend a sunshine committee, but maybe we can. I don't know. When I read it, I just kind of was wondering if it's a sunshine committee, does that apply? Your thoughts?
I understand that they're trying, what the policy is trying to do
Yeah.
to differentiate, and maybe what we do is we define them differently within the policy, and that'll simplify it.
Yeah. And I suppose we could say that a board member can't attend a sunshine meeting. I'm just not sure that that's good policy, that the public can attend something a board member can't attend. So I was thinking it would be simple to just say, no board member can attend or serve on any staff committees, with the exception of sunshine committees, or engage in solving staff problems. And that's all I got on this policy. Anybody else? Member Gallo. Oh, and then, I'm sorry, who do we have? We have Member Lopez, and then we'll go to Member Gallo. No, I have Member Gallo and then Member Lopez. Good, thank you. Member Gallo.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just had a few questions and then observations as well. I'm going to try to take them in order. On page 3 of the red line, it says, it's item 5, the board will monitor and discuss the board's process and performance on a scheduled basis. Self-monitoring will include comparison of board activity and discipline to policies. I'm not sure I understand what that is, or if we've ever done it.
Yes, thank you. I am there with you. Can we find that language, and is it possible to put it up? Because my page numbers are different, but I do remember I highlighted that, and I was like, what does that look like exactly, and have we been doing that? And so, tell me where it is again.
It's on page 3. It's item 5 under, policy B, under the board governance. So it's on the next page right after the bullet items you discussed earlier.
It's right before board job description and
Yes.
right before the specific authority on the very top of the page.
So, my page numbers are the ones I got from you. At least, I think the clean version, so that's why I'm struggling.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'm looking for a number 5. Oh, yeah, the board will monitor and discuss the board's processes and performance on a scheduled basis. Yeah, I don't know if that's ever been done.
I don't even know what it is.
If I may,
Ms. Enville?
some school boards actually do a board evaluation. When I was in Brevard, we did that. The board actually met and evaluated themselves and their effectiveness. And so I believe that's probably, I wasn't here in 2010, but I believe that, or 1993, I think this was last revised. I wasn't here then, but I'm guessing that that was probably some boards do a self-evaluation.
I can tell you in the last 2 years we've been, I think that, I know we haven't, I think that it might have been challenging to have done that. Although I don't personally disagree with the idea of there being an annual meeting of the board to just discuss what's working and what's not working. And are we following our policies? And if there's something that's not working that we need to amend in our policies, that would be an opportunity to discuss it. There's so many times when I, as the chair, have kind of walked out of here and wanted to know, guys, am I chairing the way you want me to chair? You know, am I doing an effective job? So for me, that would be helpful. Member Cobert.
So we actually used to do that at an annual board retreat, where
Okay.
we would openly, it's noticed and in the sunshine, but it was an opportunity for us to discuss amongst ourselves what was working, what was not, what we thought as a board we were doing effectively, where we thought we could improve, and even certain procedural issues that board members might have, like, please, can we use the timer, or, certain things like that. And so at an annual board retreat is a good time to do that.
Okay, that's a great idea. We just haven't had one of those in a while. Any other comments on this particular?
You have, that particular issue, sorry.
Yeah, just on this particular issue, and then I'm going to go to Member Lopez. Yes, Ms. Emba.
Fernandez.
Oh, gosh, I'm doing that again. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm going to blame it on
I'm
not
just
getting enough sleep.
I'm just wondering if it would make you feel more comfortable if instead of will, we put may.
That would be an easy way of addressing it. The other possibility I would say that at least every 2 years.
Okay.
I would like to see us do that annually, to be honest, but I think last year, if we'd have had this in place, I don't know that we would have gotten to this last year. We wouldn't have known in January what the year was going to look like. And the rest of the year, if we had taken time out to have 2 or 3 hours discussion over how we're doing, when you're building, as the superintendent likes to say, when you're building a plane in the sky, it's not time to have a retreat to talk about another subject. So I don't want to tie us to an annual meeting, but I would say at least every 2 years, the board will, and it may be in the form of retreat. I think we can leave that open.
I would like to see something in language or in policy mentioning maybe a year bi-yearly, whenever retreat, because I think there's several other items that's listed in policy that really should be tackled in the retreat, like the monitor the district performance through reports provided by the superintendent. If we're monitoring it, we need a vehicle to which we could discuss it, and I know that we do that one-on-one with the superintendent, but it would be nice to have those conversations as a board, and we can only do that in the sunshine. And then also, it talks about the planning cycle will start with the development of the strategic plan with the superintendent's annual agenda for the next year, and will include, and it goes into a list of things that are included on page 9. That would also be something that I feel would be conducted in the retreat that I'm not certain that we've done while I've been in office. And then I just have one other or two other things that I would like to discuss. One of them is on page 8, the committees. I know that we're changing it so that only the budget and the legislative committee remains. I didn't know if there's another area in policy that we list who is on those committees, and do we need to have something in policy that determines who sits on those committees? Because I know in past of the last 2 years, there's been issues with the budget committee or others where I myself have spoken up and then realized I really wasn't allowed to speak up because I don't serve on that committee, but I didn't know that I didn't serve on that committee until it was brought to my attention. And I don't even know where that language is, but that language does exist somewhere. So it might be nice just to have a vague, it needs to be broad, but have it in policy so that we understand what our role is regarding those committees. And then lastly,
I agree with that. Go ahead. I was just thought you want some feedback.
I do.
Yeah.
And then, so the last thing that I have an issue with is on page 12, number 4, and it's under, my pages are all messed up, so I apologize. 'Cause I'm a paper, so it's under support board decisions. So, and it's on page 12.5, it says, no board member may become directly involved in solving a parent or citizen's complaint at the staff level. Board members will ensure that the superintendent is informed of the issue so that they may have appropriate staff members respond. I agree with this, and I think collectively as a board, when we get issues from our constituents, we do pass them on to the area superintendent or the deputy superintendent or Dr. Jenkins as needed. The issue that I have is the language directly involved. It's almost saying like I can't be involved in an issue that one of my constituents have, and that I have an issue with because I was elected to represent my constituents. So I don't know if we could change that language to say that we will pass it over. I personally want to be informed if a constituent comes to me with a problem and I pass it off, I want to know what that resolution to that problem is because they came to me personally. And they're going to expect an answer from me as their elected official, not from the staff member. And sometimes they don't want to talk to the staff. They want to talk to the board member, and they're insistent on that. So I think that I think that I have violated this policy probably many, many times. So I don't know if we could just reword it so that it's just more applicable.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Dr. Jenkins.
we can certainly work on the wording there. I think it is some things that were done were in violation, but we can certainly have the language so that answers are provided back to board members regarding constituents. There is not supposed to be direct participation in meetings and what have you for a parent and a student and school staff, such as has happened in the past. We can make sure that language is clear that you get the feedback, though.
So can I ask, why? Can you just explain to me what the problem with the policy
Yeah,
and why?
because it's not governance, Member Gallo. Actually, if every board member goes and attends IEP meetings, it's way outside of the line of governance, and it just creates mass confusion. But I do, and then you end up being subpoenaed when we have to go to court. A board
you may
member is
have to
subpoenaed to
testify against-
testify against her fellow board members. And so we want to keep that very clearly delineated. But we can clean up the language so it indicates that you get a response so that you know what's going on in that particular instance.
Okay.
So-
No,
Let me, one other problem, and going back to, I hate to keep bringing up previous experience, but the role of the board, as I said at the beginning, none of us actually has any power individually to do anything. It's only when we work together as a board and we pass a motion to do something that we have power. So I don't know the situations, but let's say a parent comes to me and wants to, their child to be moved to another school. And I forward that message on to the appropriate people to communicate what that process is. I, like you all, I want to know that there's a response, because I don't ever feel like I can release the concern until I know there's a response. And if they come back to me 6 months later and say, I never heard from anybody, okay, now I think I have something to bring to the superintendent, that we have a non-responsive employee. But the actual decision of whether that student is going to be transferred has to follow a process that has been created by the superintendent in line with the policies that the board's adopted. So if I personally like this parent and they're good friends and they want things differently, and I'm gonna tell you, I have, as a commissioner, I had people that walked in and wanted certain things, neighbors of mine that wanted certain things. They wanted access to a park for their kids for a certain sport, and they dropped my name and explained who they were and expected that to happen. Well, that's an abuse of my power. If I had done it, it would be unethical for me to abuse my power to I think, to benefit a friend and circumvent the process in place. So the way I see this, I see it as designed to say that yes, we are the ones who are responsible directly to citizens, so we're going to hear from them. We're going to make sure the process is adhered to, but we're going to stop short of intervening and changing the outcome. Because when we start changing the outcome and it no longer fits into the process that's in place, we've now given one child or one family an unfair advantage over another. And we all believe in equity. So for me, the idea that we stop short of that and say, we want to know what's going on, we want to help people get answers and get fair access, but we don't want to help people get unfair advantage.
And I 100% agree with that.
I know you would, yeah.
Madam Chair. I guess I'm thinking more on a larger scale, like where we do get involved, and I haven't in my district because I don't have the expansion that Member Gould and you have out in Windermere. But there's been instances where, as a board member, when you hear from your constituents, you're going to take issues to the superintendent, like we need to move forward on a school faster than we thought. Like there are times when we are getting into the weeds trying to advocate on behalf of our citizens, and we need to do that with the superintendent, with the staff. And I just want to make sure that that language wouldn't hinder us in our ability to do that job.
I completely agree.
It does
I
not.
completely agree.
It
And
does-
with
it does
regard
not.
to moving a school forward, the one thing I will say that makes that different is that that is an issue that comes to the board
The
every
entire
year.
board.
It does.
So if an individual board member or board members are saying, I want to improve the quality of this school, and another board member wants a new school, those are going to be possibly competing, but all of that is going to come before the board, and the board, not an individual board member, should be solving that.
Right. And
Yeah,
so I just want to
yeah.
make sure that we would still be able to advocate, and those type of issues we'd be able to advocate to bring them to the board so that the board
Yes.
as a whole can make a decision. I just want to make sure
Absolutely.
that language doesn't hinder our ability to do our job
Okay.
collectively, not individually.
Yeah. And the other thing that is very helpful about the feedback I think that we get is it attunes us to where are there potential deficiencies in how we're handling or responding to things. And that is a part of being a responsive government
Absolutely.
is important, and we have an obligation to make sure that's happening. Dr. Jenkins.
Absolutely, and I was going to clarify one other item before we leave this particular section, Madam Chair, members of the board. So when you compiled except for our new board member, when you compiled and worked on your new strategic plan, that is the board setting direction and goals for the year. And in a typical year, I believe it was Member Castor Dental who said, remember you had this chart of all the different things we needed to take care of this year? And it included, once we got everything in place, then you looped back around to your annual retreat to cover those items. Well, COVID blew the whole calendar out of the water, but we will have that annual retreat, and that is when you go back through and look at your strategic plan. We also do the monthly strategic plan updates. The last one we had, I told the chair I loved it because the discussion was around instruction. I don't remember what the topic was now.
Yeah.
Equity, I believe it was.
Yes, it was.
And
yeah,
so
it's
that
excellent.
kind of discussion, that is your periodic, you're taking pieces of your strategic plan and having data and updates throughout the year. And then your retreat typically is a culmination of all of that. So you help set direction and adjust your strategic plan for the following year. That's the way it would typically work. Those that are on the board recall those annual retreats. I think we'll get back to that this year.
Yeah. So while we didn't have a retreat per se, literally, we came in and the first thing the superintendent said to me was, I think it's time for us to look at the strategic plan afresh. Do you agree? And so we did, as a group, yeoman's work within that first year. The second year was COVID. Other issues.
That was all I
Okay.
had. Thank you, Madam
All right,
Chair.
excellent. Member Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that we speak a lot. So now, I don't want to feel behind or just try to, because I want to talk about the code of conduct policy. I just want to support what you were saying, and school board member Caster Dental as well, just to show my support on that one. And also that the terminology, I think that is very subjective, specifically in double I, because in the last sentence, manner which would create polarization on the board, in the organization or community. So I think that the terminology also put us in risk, because it's based on the person who is going to interpret or define or the point of view of the person who's gonna see this policy. So I think that needs to be changed, and I also agree with Miss Angie Gallo, with School Board Angie Gallo. I feel the same way sometimes, but I always receive a solution, and I love to follow up. The principals are doing a great job. The superintendent is doing a great job. Deputy Dr. Vasquez, and I know that all of you feel the same way. But I always, love to follow up with the parents. Everything is all right, and maybe the terminology may make me feel that I'm doing something that is illegal at this point. So I also support the comments of School Board Member Gallo as well. So that's my opinion. Thank you so much for your time.
Excellent. So I think that there's large agreement on this. I do think that the wording is going to be challenging. Let's go to Vice Chair Gould. Vice Chair?
Thank you. My comment was just on the retreat. I'm in agreement with clarifying the language on our role and our ability to communicate with constituents without interfering with day-to-day operations. But on the retreat, with the exception of this year when it would have been impossible to really have that meeting, I would prefer it to be annually, because there's been every single year that I've been on the board, there have either been a policy change, or I got to hear outside of just the context of the one night's discussion at the end of a very long meeting, kind of the priorities of each board member. And so not only being able to pivot our procedures and be responsive to things like, communication, which always came up a lot, but we really had some time to share, what drives us and understand each other better. So I would not want to lose that to a biannual, because every other year we're also in an election cycle, and things change. So I think that communication, it's a great opportunity.
Excellent point of view. Excellent observations. We just need a provision that there may be emergency situations in the event of a 100-year pandemic.
Oh my God, don't say that.
Let the next century worry about that. All right, if not, we're going to go on to our next policy.
Okay. So the next policy is BBBG. We are recommending, this is an interesting one, because we're recommending here that BBBG be incorporated into BDC. And in addition to that, recommending that policy BIE be repealed and get incorporated into BDC as well. So just to start off, the changes that we made on the first paragraph are just for it to read a little bit better than it was reading before, just to kind of clarify the language there. It substantively says exactly the same thing. The only thing that was added here as an additional item is item 6, and that comes from BIE, that deals with the bonding of the board members. So underneath that, you would have what used to be BDC, which is organization and officers, but now all of this would be one policy. So if you go to page 2 of that, again, in here, we've just made changes that are global changes, and then if you look at section 3, the sentence I deleted from there is what I added back into as number 6 in the very beginning of the policy. So it's just moving things around a little bit. But for the most part, the 3 policies substantively say the same thing.
Okay. So, okay. So you want to stop there?
Yes, if you want to go on, then
Sure.
after that, we'll go into the next
Okay.
policy.
Oh, this would be the place under number 3, under BDC.
Mhm.
I think to address the issue of the chair, the vice chair presiding. I think that's where we could address the issue of, in the event of we don't have a vice chair. So, and we've talked through that, so I think there's clear direction on that. I'm taking a minute to look at see if I have anything else. Does anybody else have anything?
Member Byrd is queued up.
Just BDC? Or we just on BDC?
So it's a little bit confusing because it's actually BBBG, but we're going to recommend repeal of BBBG so that it gets incorporated into BDC. So in essence, BDC will now consist of 3 policies: BDC, BBBG, and BIE.
Okay. All right, any other
Madam Chair,
comments?
Member Byrd has queued in to
Member
speak.
Byrd?
Yeah, I just wanted to, number 2, the vice chair. It says shall be elected annually, but I know we have recently been doing 2 years, I think. So I think maybe that needs to be looked at.
I wasn't,
I believe we did annually, but Vice Chair Gould was simply reelected for a second year.
Okay. Okay.
any other questions, comments? Okay. I have a few, but I don't think it's on this. So,
I'm sorry?
want to keep going? I said I have a
Yeah.
few, but I don't think it's on this.
Okay. I also did want to point out that the statute that deals with reorganization meeting specifically calls for an annual meeting where you elect your vice chair. So this would also falls in line with the statutory requirements on that provision.
So we haven't gotten to BEDH, right?
We have not gotten to BDEH, not yet. That will be the last one,
Okay.
but we're almost there. We're
No,
almost there.
that's okay.
Yeah. So the next one is somewhat related to BEDH, but it's policy BE, and it deals with your board meetings in and of themselves. Again, page 1 of that policy is just the global changes that we talked about earlier. Again, page 2 is the same thing. And page 3 is the same thing. We actually haven't changed anything substantively in this policy at all.
Okay, any board members have any concerns with the information, with the language? I don't, so, okay, we'll keep going.
Next policy is policy BEC. Policy BEC deals again with the executive sessions. What we've done to this policy is a bit of a big change here, but it's actually, it makes it read a lot better. What we've done is we've split out the 2 different types of executive sessions. So whether you're having an executive session for litigation versus collective bargaining and safety issues, those have different rules that pertain to each one. So what we've done is separate them out and basically put what those rules are and procedures are for each one of those in that policy. And that policy is only 1 page.
Got it, okay. Nobody, we're
Nope.
good. Keep
Okay.
going.
All right, last but not least, here we are. Policy BEDH. Policy BEDH, as you can see, like I said earlier, this is where we made the most changes. And there are a lot of changes in here. As you can see, it looks like somebody bled all over the policy. What we've tried to do in here is, once again, separate things out. So you have public comment period for pre-agenda, and then public comment period during your regularly scheduled board meetings. So what we've done in here is basically separate the two out because there's different rules that apply to each one, including, as we had previously talked about, because of Robert's rules limiting the public speaking comments during the regularly scheduled meeting to those items that are on the agenda versus pre-agenda where somebody from the public can bring up pretty much any topic that they want. So if you look through that, that's what we've done. That's what the bulk of the changes have been, is to differentiate between the two different kinds of public speaking periods during your meetings. Let's see here. We've also added some additional flexibility so that if you have, for instance, a topic that is very controversial or that the public has taken a great interest in, and you have a lot of people that sign up to speak, it will now be within your discretion to either limit that time, give them more time, or however the board sees fit. And that's going to be done by consensus. We haven't put anything in here that requires you to take any formal votes or anything like that. So like I said, what we've done in here is also give you a lot of flexibility based off the experiences and the comments that we heard from everybody. On section 3, where it says sign up to speak, the changes we made here are more in line with our current practice on how we do this. And then on section 4, where it deals with germane topics, we again split these out between the pre-agenda meeting and your regularly scheduled board meeting, so that that gives more clarification there on the differences. Other than that, those are really just the overview of the changes that we made to BDH, but I anticipated that you would have a lot more, so.
Okay. Awesome, thank you. All right, board members. If nobody jumps in, I will. Okay, Member Gallo.
No, I'll go to you.
Oh, okay, all right, so the first one under number 1, the idea that the pre-agenda period shall start promptly before, 30 minutes promptly 30 minutes before, sorry, the pre-agenda meeting. We have not been able this year on many occasions to abide by that because technical difficulties getting online, people getting home from work with challenges on I-4, other things like that have resulted in us starting our pre-agenda meeting much later. And so the idea that it's 30 minutes before, and then if we say it's 30 minutes before, but we get done and there's nobody here, then we're moving the pre-agenda up. So I think we had talked about this before. The way we do it in practice is it's all one meeting. We open the meeting, and the first thing we do is take public comment, and then we go to the pre-agenda. And so I think that first paragraph and the second paragraph should be revised to reflect what we do. Because I don't think, I hate starting meetings late. I will tell you that. It bothers me to no end to start a meeting late. But I also know that there are reasons that we've had to do that, and there will be reasons in the future. So I don't want a policy that we're violating by not promptly doing something. I wouldn't mind if it says we will endeavor to start every meeting on time, but I do think that the pre-agenda meeting and the public comment meeting are one meeting. So I would change that. Number 2, allotment of time for speakers. I had a little concern about every person getting 3 minutes because I thought that we might change that, but then I see you addressed it in the last sentence. And you also addressed it in the 3rd paragraph, which gives us the ability, if we have 200 speakers and it's on the same subject, to, by board decision or by chair decision, however you want that to be, to limit that. I think right now it's by board decision, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And that's fine. I just, Huh? Yeah. Yeah, no, if, just in case you wanted somebody else to be the bad guy. But I'm really thrilled to share that responsibility of saying we're going to limit it. I am, so we're fine there. Speakers wishing to address items on, under 4C. No, 4, Roman numeral 1C. I don't know why it's number 1C. That might be mislabeled. But I do want to bring something to the board's attention on this. So we're saying that speakers that wish to address items that are on the regular meeting can't speak during the pre-agenda meeting. I think that's what this is about. I agree with that, but I do wonder if we want to also, if we know that we have something coming up in 2 weeks or at our next meeting, do we want to limit the ability of people to come before on something that we're going to hear public testimony on at a later time? So say whatever the controversial issue is, and it's coming before the board in 2 months. Every meeting, do we want to take public input every meeting on something that we're going to vote on at a future time? Or do we want to say if it's an item that's agended for a future meeting, we take public comment then? What we're saying right now is you can't talk earlier in the day on something. You have to talk at the time we're going to vote on it. But we also let you come the week before and the week before and the week before.
Would it be the same?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's catchy, but if it's gonna be the same person saying the same thing, I don't think we need to do that because you can tell somebody's passionate about a subject or whatever it is, policy that we're trying to legislate, but I just think it's unfair to have the same person because people I need to get my point across. So they'll come to pre-time and they'll come again and come again. There may be other people who want the opportunity to share and to talk, and then through a process, maybe some of our board members, we may have come up, like you said, some other situations, some more information may have come up. So I don't think we should give that person that much time to keep, if it's the same person. You understand? Because I'm sure we're probably going to get some concerns throughout this year because of the unique situation we're in now, where people are going to be very, very passionate about whatever, going back to school and the testing and all of that. So I'm just hoping that in some way we can put somewhere in policy that you don't want to limit people's freedom of speech, but if it's the same person all the time, understand what I'm trying to say?
I do.
That's a waste of time because there should be more people. There may be more people that have some other issues, same issue, but another side. Because you can have a person, we always know that this person's going to come. They're going to talk about this all the time. And then we say we only got 30 minutes or we've only limited 20 minutes, and then the time is taken. That's just my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Member Felder. Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple comments regarding that. Number one is we don't even know ourselves what we're going to be voting on from 1 week to the next week because the agendas are set, as you well aware, 7 days before. So I don't know that the public would be aware of when we are going to take something up to vote unless we publicly stated we will. So logistically, I think that might be of concern. My second issue, and I agree with Member Felder that you don't ever want one person to monopolize all of our time saying the same thing over and over again. But with that's kind of a slippery slope in my mind because I don't want us ever to be perceived as limiting speech or limiting someone's right to continually reach out to us if they feel like their needs haven't been met. But with that said, I think, and we'll talk about this further, we're going to be getting a lot more flexibility in the time and what we'll be allowed to do up here from the dais. I just want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak that wants to speak. And so I don't know how we would put that in policy, but to Member Felder's point, if someone's monopolizing it and we've heard from that person repeatedly, I don't know if we could put something in policy that said, well, you go to the end of the line, because we've heard from you so many times and we want to make sure that we give fair representation to everybody. Like, I don't know if that's something we could do, but I would be hesitant to not allowing people to speak their mind over and over again.
Okay, let's hear from Member Gould.
I agree with everything. that Member Felder said regarding the repetition. However, I do also think that Member Gallup's points are valid because of the limitation that we might have. Is there a way to say that if you're coming back consecutively or within a period of time on the same subject, that we could say you only have 1 minute to recap? That if it's a new subject, I don't know how we'd monitor it though.
Ms.
So I just want to
Hernandez?
point out that your policy actually doesn't have anything in here regarding the order of the speakers. And it also has a provision that allows you to say, you're only going to get a minute because we've already heard you, you know, if that's the prerogative of the board.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the Member Gallo just said that'd be up to the chair. My point earlier, do you want me to be the bad guy or you want to be the bad guy? Okay, but the order of speaking is also something that could be addressed if we have 30 minutes and we know we have a finite, you know, we have more speakers than we can hear from, that we may, if we have speakers that have come back numerous times, that might be something. All of it's gonna be challenging and none of it's gonna be fun. Member Byrd?
Oh, I was just gonna comment on something else. That's why I queued, but
Okay.
as far as this goes, yeah, I agree with Member Gallo that I think that it's a real slippery slope trying to, in any way, say someone can't speak again. I just, you know, and I don't really know how you'd monitor what they're gonna say. You never know what they're gonna say when they get up there anyway, so.
I'm going to revisit this once, and then I'm not going to belabor the point. But I was trying to think of an example that I could use that would be less controversial. But an example was we knew we were going to be voting on high school start times, and we knew well in advance. And there was a lot of everybody was aware of that. And if every meeting that we had, if 30 minutes was filled up with the same people telling us the same thing with the same opinion on something we knew we were going to take, you know, a 6 or 8 hour public hearing on. And that, I would say, that's an example of when you have a set time frame that you know you're going to vote on something, that you suspend conversation or public comment on something that's going to come for the board on future action. That's the type of example I was thinking of. I wasn't thinking that we're just going to say we heard from you at the last 6 meetings, so we're not going to hear from you today. But I do think, and it hasn't happened, it's only happened a couple of times. It was a more common problem at the county commission where people knew that they wanted to kind of load things up. So if it was going to be a really controversial land use matter, you'd have the same 20 or 30 people come in every meeting for 6 meetings before the meeting to say the same thing, just use time. And then there were other people who didn't get time because they weren't organized and they showed up, and so they couldn't get their public comments on another subject. We can cross that bridge when we get to it, but we're here right now, so I just wanted to float the issue. Let's move on to a different subject. So I dominated that conversation. Member Gallo, I think, did we hear from you yet? Go ahead, Member Gallo.
Thank you. I'll be quick, actually. The only thing, well, I'll circle back. The 15 minutes, I see that it striked out the 15 minutes prior, and then it was put back in a different place. I just want to make sure that if we have someone who chooses to speak before the board, and there's time, because, you know, that if they show up right at 4:30 and it's not 15 minutes prior, that they'll still be allowed to grab a card and sign up and speak, especially if we have time. And further to that point, and I don't know that this necessarily it needs to be in policy, so I don't know if it would be like a procedure, but something that at the very beginning would allow us to know how many speakers we have, so that at the very beginning we can determine if we're going to say, okay, we have this many speakers, we want to hear from as many as possible, so we're going to limit time to 2 minutes, a minute and a half, whatever it is, just so that that's a common practice that we do at every pre-agenda meeting or even our agenda items.
And I think that's part of the reason for having that 15 minutes ahead of time, so there is time to consider that, and for me to determine, or am I going to ask you guys to extend that period of time? We've never had the ability to abbreviate the period of time so that everybody can be heard, but that gives us that opportunity. Ms. Fernandez?
Would you like me to put waiver language after that as well? Because I certainly can do that.
Yeah. Was that it? Okay.
Yeah, for now, thank you.
Okay, let's go to Member Gould. If you had anything else, Vice Chair.
No, I didn't.
Okay. All right, Member Byrd.
I don't mean to belabor this because I know that I addressed it last time, but I'm still having, some, I don't know. I still need some more clarification about the pre-agenda public comment versus our regular board meeting public comment, why we do a separate one. I understand the reason is because what I was told is, according to Robert's Rules of Order, you're supposed to have public comment that's germane to the agenda. But I guess my question is, when I looked at what other school districts do, it appears that no other school district does a separate public comment for non-agenda items. I think one or two of the ones near us do, like, if it's not according to the agenda, they speak at the end, but all the rest of them, they're just grouped together during their public comment period. So, and I had, and I specifically asked about if it's agenda or non-agenda. So I'm just curious if that's a Robert's Rules of Order thing. How are these other school districts doing it at one time? And the reason I'm doing this, just I've been asked so many times why we do it this way. And I've been asked by, other elected officials, other government people, other, community members. They don't understand why we have this separate public comment period time. So if I could just get a little more insight into that, that would be helpful. And so yeah, that's it for now.
So as far as why other districts are doing it the way they're doing it, I mean, I can't answer for other districts, but I don't know if those other districts have in their policy that the board meeting has to follow Robert's rules or not. And if it does, then they're not following Robert's rules. They're violating the rules. I mean, which certainly you can do, but I mean, you'd be violating your own policy.
Okay, but to counter to that, we're supposed to follow Robert's rules for our pre-agenda meeting. And so when we're taking public comment, how would that not be violating Robert's rules?
You don't have an agenda for pre-agenda.
Okay. Member Gallo, on this same subject, yes? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to make sure I understand it now. So in Robert Rules of Order, it states that we cannot take comment on anything that isn't listed on the agenda.
I mean, I don't know if Robert's rules specifically prohibits you. Let me turn to the general counsel to answer that, actually.
I don't know if it does either. I think this comes from the statutory thing. 286-0114 provides in subsection 2 that members of the public shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard on a proposition before a board or commission. And so that goes back to, we publish an agenda which contains items upon which you're going to vote. And so that is where the public gets their reasonable opportunity to provide that public input. I think the pre-agenda, and I would defer to the superintendent on this, the pre-agenda public comment was designed as an opportunity to give the public another opportunity to bring things before you that aren't on your agenda and things that they want you to address. And so that gives the public the opportunity to publicly state, instead of emailing you individually, but gives them that forum that they can come and bring those things to you. Now, those items might then come to you before a board, and the public will give another opportunity to address those, but I believe that's the delineation between the two. And I have to check exactly what Robert's Rules says. My book is up in my office, so.
But there's nothing to preclude us from including it all into one meeting if as a board, the
She
consensus
needs to
was to do
research
so.
that.
Yeah, I need to look at that.
Dr. Jenkins?
Madam Chair, what I recall, and I see Linda Cobert's eyebrows up, prior to this, there was no ability to address the board on items that were not on the agenda. And it was because At the time, I believe we had a different general counsel, and it wasn't Woody. At the time, it was indicated that if it is not on the agenda, the public comment should not be taking place. And I believe it was Bill Sublette, forgive me if I'm blaming him. He said, we don't have an arena for people to come and address us about any other topic that's not on the agenda. Other entities do have that opportunity, and so hence we had the pre-agenda opportunity for public speakers, meaning to give more access to the board for public testimony. That's my recollection.
Member Colbert?
If I may, that's where I was going. The public comment period was created to press the easy button for the public, to create a more transparent process and easier access to the board in its entirety. Prior to that, you had to make an appointment, and I think I explained to you guys it was done back in that little room back there with the board around the table, and the person had to stand. It was pretty intimidating. So the public comment period wasn't to preclude commenting on agenda items. It was to create an easier access to the board in its entirety to come and express your opinion on anything that you wanted to. What I like are the revisions and changes in the policy where we could manage that a little bit better. So if we had 20 speakers, maybe we need to limit that speaking to 1.5 minutes so that everyone has a chance, something along those lines. And I like the chair having that ability to manage that. And if you want to look to the entire board for consensus, that's great. But I think that you have the right to manage that as you see fit. So it may seem odd, it may seem different from what other boards do, but the purpose of it, the intent, was to create an easier access to the board in its entirety.
Member Castrodental, and then I'm going to opine on this, if I may. Member Castrodental?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm reading the policy language, and I admit I'm confused by some of the language that I guess I should know, but it says the pre-agenda comment period shall begin promptly 30 minutes prior to the pre-agenda meeting. I kind of thought those were the same thing.
Yeah. It was just the easiest way to kind of differentiate the two, because your official pre-agenda meeting where you're discussing is what it's trying to delineate, I think, what the difference is. I mean,
Member
I can make that more clear.
So it's the pre-agenda meeting where we say, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yeah,
Yes.
Member Castrodental, what I had suggested earlier is that instead of us trying to comply with the policy, that we make the policy comply with what we're doing.
Right.
Because you're right, we're not doing two separate meetings.
Okay.
We open the public comment pre-agenda meeting. It's one meeting, just like
Okay.
so the idea that we're going to say that one has to start 30 minutes before the other starts also means that if we have no public speakers, then what do? Adjourn and come back 30 minutes later? So we are going to, you can just ignore that whole paragraph.
Okay. So
We're going to
then,
fix that.
okay, ignore that.
Yeah.
So then where are we
So the issue,
with the combination of those? Are we
So-
looking at the combination of public comment and commenting on the agenda, or no?
so what we've got on the table that Member Byrd has asked is, right now we do the open public comment. I'm going to call it open public comment because it's not restricted to things on the agenda. We have that as part of our pre-agenda meeting. What Member Byrd has asked is, why is that at pre-agenda? Why isn't that either at the beginning or the end of our regular meeting? So that's kind of the issue on the table. I will tell you, I think I've shared with you, in Orange County 4 years, forever, their whole morning agenda was their consent agenda, and board discussion would take the entire morning. And then in the afternoon, we would have public hearings. And we would vote on a lot of stuff on the consent agenda, and we would make a lot of, hear a lot of things on discussion. And the public didn't get to speak to any of that ever. They only got to speak to things that were, by statute, public hearings. And there were a lot of decisions that we made that they had no input on. So I had championed the idea that we should not vote on anything till the public can comment on it. And had to actually get that as a charter amendment because I couldn't get that incorporated by the mayor into the practice. We expanded that beyond what's on the agenda and basically said you can talk about anything you want to talk about if it's germane to the business of county government. Similar to what Bill proposed when he came in 2008. I think we did this back in 2006. It was part of our regular meeting. It did have a defined amount of time because you will have times when you have very controversial issues, and if there isn't a defined amount of time, you could spend 8 hours before you ever get to your agenda. So I think it's important that we have a defined amount of time. It does not matter to me whether that's at pre-agenda or at the beginning of our regular meeting. I do recognize that the types of comments we sometimes hear, oh, that's why it sounds weird, here. We would hear very offensive things at the county commission meeting. There's no question that we would hear offensive things, but we rarely heard something that was directly critical of an employee. I mean, we might be attacked personally, okay, but you put yourself up for that when you run. But the thing that does concern me is when false accusations are made about individuals, and those individuals have hundreds of students that are looking up to them every day, and that was, I think, the reason that the district said, even though we have a policy, you're not allowed to do that. We do know from time to time people do that, and for me to stop them, I can't stop them before they say something, and cutting them off, it's worked pretty well, but there's a dynamic here that you have to recognize that there's no audience. And I hate this because I believe so strongly in the value of public input, but I have to also recognize there are people that will exploit an audience and the opportunity to get in front of an audience. And the concern I know that the superintendent has had and has expressed to us over and over again is that we do not want any of our outstanding employees to ever have their reputations diminished because we've created a forum where we can't ensure that that doesn't happen for inappropriate reasons. Does that make any sense? So I think that's the primary reason why why the district previously has done what it's done. Member Colbert, and then we'll come back over. Member Colbert?
So if we're going into the delineation between live streaming, the public comment period during our regular scheduled meetings, which we live stream, and the open public comment period, that is the other reason that they are differentiated. And it is a protection. If someone comes before the board and it's an emotional issue that they have, we also have a responsibility to protect our employees and our students. Because once that, if it's a false accusation, gets out in there into the cloud, you can't put that back. You can't, and that can really damage an employee or a student. And that's another reason that it's not private. It's obviously a public meeting, but that is one of the protections that you're afforded by having the two different meetings.
Member Castellano, back to you.
I will continue to listen.
Okay.
I'm
Member
torn
Gallo?
by all the logistics with
I-
all of this.
I understand.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I'm torn by the balancing the competing interests here. It's not easy. Member Gallo?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that explanation, because we obviously, as a board, want to do everything within our power to protect our employees. So I guess I'm curious as to how other districts handle it, because we're not the only district that has highly emotional speakers that will want to come, even though we do have rules in place that might violate those rules. So does anybody know how, because we are unique, and that's not a bad thing. We may be doing something better than everybody else and trying to protect our employees, but I was just curious because all other school boards across the state do, they don't do it this way. It's not separated out. It is live broadcast, so I'm sure that they have the same issues that we have. So I was just curious
Teresa, I want to say.
what the,
I don't believe we've confirmed that they're all live broadcast, and some of my peers are asking how they can switch to the way we do it. I don't know that we've confirmed they all live broadcast, Member Gallo.
Okay, perfect. All right, and that really answers my question. I think the chair did an excellent job of convincing me we need to stay as is, so.
Member Felder?
Yes. All of what fellow board members have said and discussed, and I understand Board Member Byrd's concern about the opening forum and so forth, and I know that we know this, but I think we have to constantly be reminded why we're here. We're here because people believed in our leadership, and they trusted our leadership, and they trusted that we would be their voice. At the same time, we have a twofold responsibility. We must at all times, protect the integrity of what we do. We protect educators, whether they're teachers, administrators, students, the superintendent and her staff. And it's a thin line. It is. We have been given a grave responsibility, a very important responsibility. While at the same time we live in America where we enjoy freedoms such as speaking your mind and speech and so forth. But I think that being a teacher, having been a teacher for 40 years, and I've had some experiences, especially when a person's integrity has been put on the line and there's been some untruths. And that's why we have a board. This is a line of demarcation to protect. We legislate, we govern, but we also protect. So, and I'm so glad that we're having this discussion. It seems lengthy, so that when something comes up, the public, they can refer and reference back, go to a frame of reference where we took time to really discuss this need and this importance, the fact that we are concerned and we're not just sitting up here. We're sitting up here because you elected us, and you have to trust the process that we are going to use to be the best that we can be for you. So I think we should keep it, and I'm sure we are, with that meeting 4:30, let them say, and then when it's time for the meeting, if there's opportunity, and as our chairperson, you monitor that, because when a person is highly emotional, as a teacher, you know, your students come in like that sometime. The next day they're sorry. But when it's out there, you can't pull it back. So I think that we should constantly sort of be mindful, and as much as possible, attorney, make the wording in such a way that it will give people that opportunity, but we have to remember why we're here. We have to protect who we represent. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Felder. That was very helpful. Let me make one more comment on this. I don't remember, it might have been Dr. Jenkins, I can't remember who said it last time we discussed this, but the purpose of the open public comment is to provide input to the board. And while I have asked for us to record those, at least an audio recording, because there are times when I want to go back and be clear about what was said so I can look into it, so I can respond to it. I have not been advocating for us to have some live stream broadcast of it because of the concerns that we've discussed, that most people don't do this, a few people do, more people will do it if it's live streamed. There are people who unfortunately will take advantage of that opportunity, who find no other way to get retaliation against a teacher or a principal that they didn't like or didn't agree with. And when it's our regular meeting, we know what the agenda is. The staff, all of us are prepared to react and respond. We cannot react and respond to accusations that might take place here at the dais and be live streamed. And so we give two people a forum and a voice. And I think we have a certain amount of responsibility to make sure that the use of that is done in an appropriate way and is done honestly. And I don't know how we do that through live streaming. So for that reason, I'm still at this point not comfortable with live streaming. Again, this is an entirely different arena than county government in terms of the types of issues that we deal with and the really gut-wrenching emotional issues that we deal with. So if there, Member Byrd, I'm sorry, Member Gould wants to comment, and then we'll go back to you, Member Byrd, to close out. Member Gould?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm getting terrible feedback, so if my cadence is off, sorry. One thing that I've experienced since I've been on the board with our public comment is if there is a common thread or an overarching policy issue that needs to be brought forward, one of us or all of us pick up that gauntlet and bring it to the board table, to the full discussion of the board, on camera, so on and so forth. But I'll tell you, I found that to be the exception. It is usually a one-off issue, and it is very personalized against a school, against an individual, or a process that was needed to be handled differently. But again, the result is the same. We are addressing it. The superintendent and her staff intervene, and then we get feedback on what happened. So I would not be in favor at this point of limiting our public comment any more than we have, but I don't want to live stream it either because I think it will hurt the integrity and the ability for people with real issues to be able to come forward and voice them.
Thank you, Member Gould. Member Byrd?
I'm just curious if we've ever thought about doing a delay on the broadcast, like a 5-second delay or something.
Member Byrd, I do believe that's been discussed. I'll turn to the superintendent. There is an issue that I think we need to be aware of in terms of making snap censorship decisions and who has the authority to make those censorship decisions. So I personally don't think it's realistic that somebody in the back room is going to have a 5-second delay to decide what they're going to air and not air. And this is where, and the issue of censorship, the one problem you run into is if you don't censor, it's a problem. If you do censor, you've censored. So I'll turn to the superintendent, but I think the 5-second delay is probably not going to be sufficient.
Madam Chair, that's exactly right. You can't have someone in the back making a split second. 5 seconds is very fast. If you recall, when we had those very long public input sessions around opening school, there was someone who used profanity. You will not catch it. I mean, public broadcasters get fined when that kind of thing slips through. So they have experts that are supposed to be able to catch those on a delay. I would not put staff in the predicament of being able to edit and censor on the spot with 5-second delay. I like most what was said. The opportunity is to address the school board with public testimony. And I think we can get that done. We can also make provisions for recording it in case board members want to go back and be able to listen to it. We are certainly ready to accommodate that as well.
Member Byrd? Okay, thank you. Member Colbert?
I just want to add my voice. I agree with the idea of recording it so that we can have clarification where we might need it, where we as a board member want to bring this to the table in full. But I want to make the point, the difference between what we do and what a county, city, municipality, or any other board does, we're dealing with people's children, and it can become highly emotional. And that's the difference between what we do and our charge and any other governmental board. They're not dealing with the emotional issue of parents and children and their relationships with their teachers and what might happen on a day-to-day basis. And that's where finding that balance between transparency and the protection of individual rights is very, very important. As you've seen, we've dealt with extremely emotional issues, and you don't want to make that forum into a place where they can hurt other people. The idea is to address this board, and I think the way that we do it, but adding the audio recording for clarification is the way to go.
All right, and Dr. Jenkins, in terms of that, I think that you and your team will have some work to do thinking through what becomes a recording that may have violated our policies in terms of subject matter, what becomes of that public record. while it sounds simple to me, for us to record it, it is a public record once it's recorded. So I don't think the board has made a decision that we're going to record these. The language that you have in the policy gives us the ability to, and I think that we should postpone that decision until you and our general counsel can consider the ramifications. Again, I so much want to have a mental way to just record everything that's said and walk out of here clear-minded, and that helps me to do that. But I also know that if we have a situation where somebody has said something that's inappropriate, I still get concerned about. On the other hand, I know that anybody that walks in can record the meeting. Anybody that's watching on TV can record the meeting. It's a public meeting. It's free to be recorded. So, but I think we need to give the council, our council and the superintendent some time to come back to us. Is there anything else? So I think I'm really kind of excited, guys, that we did this in 2 hours, because I thought my comments alone were going to take 2 hours. And I want to thank the board members. I'll call on you in just a minute. I just want to thank each of you for your patience with me today on these issues and for your input and engagement in this, because it's really important. This to me is, not the strategic plan, but it's really important that we're clear on how we're operating. Member Castor-Dendel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one more point of confusion for me. I am listening and reading the policies, and I still don't know where we left off with how much time we're allotting to a comment period or what time we're starting the meetings. And is that still up in the air or to be determined, or do I just miss that?
So as far as starting the meetings, we're going to go back and work on that language that's in there.
We
And
are going to
then-
include language that we will endeavor to start our public comment pre-agenda meeting on time. We're going to lump them together in public comment pre-agenda as one meeting. And we're going to endeavor to start on time, but we're not going to say that we will promptly because things may come up. And we are going to still have a maximum of 30 minutes public comment time and 3 minutes per speaker. But we do have the caveat in this language that would be coming back to the board that says that the board, depending upon the number of speakers, may reduce that amount of time.
Are you on the
So those would
start
be-
time of the actual meeting where we talked about starting it earlier?
Both. I mean, does that mean that
Yeah.
we're starting at 4:30, the whole thing, and
That hasn't,
That has not
that's
been
not been addressed. Dr. Jenkins, you want to comment on that?
I was going to say, I thought that's where you were headed, because we
Okay.
never did circle back to that. If you recall, when we had the policy initially, we were going to put language in there about the start time, and we actually had it in the document. And I think it was Member Byrd who had some concerns around it, so we set it aside. In individual one-on-one meetings, everyone was interested in starting earlier. That's the board's prerogative. My staff will have to be here whenever the meeting starts. But that language was purposely set aside so the board could determine, do you want to start the meeting at 4 o'clock instead of 4:30, pre-agenda meeting at 4 o'clock instead of 4:30? The board has no determination on that. We are at your pleasure.
So that'll be a board decision rather than a policy directed. Obviously, what we put in the policy
I
is a
see.
board decision, but it doesn't bind us in the future. So we're silent in
it.
the policy at this point.
But your current policy requires pre-agenda public comment to start at 4:30.
Our current policy says, I didn't see that, it was still in there. Don't we want to take that out? So,
Well, that's what
I'm
we're
sorry.
recommending in the proposed changes, yes.
no, I'm sorry, the version that we have in front of us,
Yes.
as amended
Right,
by you all,
Right.
is silent on the start time.
it is.
Good, that's what I thought, okay. Member
Okay.
Castor-Dendel.
thank you. So I guess that's still up for discussion among us, because
Yes.
4:30 might be too early for members of the public.
For the regular meeting,
For
you
the
mean?
regular
Yes.
meeting, but
Maybe 5.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's ideal. I don't know. That's
I agree.
still up for discussion. Okay,
It
thank you.
absolutely is. It absolutely, I think taking it out of the policy, it gives us the flexibility to change it, to make it later, to make it earlier. Okay?
And you might actually try an announcement for a 5 o'clock meeting and see if there are any concerns, or try a pilot for a 4:30 meeting and see if there are any concerns. With it out of policy, gives you a little bit of time, but I understand folks are wondering when that decision will be made. You may just decide you want to try a different couple of times. As long as you advertise it, it is your decision if you want to try to advertise a meeting for 4:30 or a meeting for 5 o'clock, and see how it works.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we wrap up? Vice Chair Gould, you're recognized.
One thing we did not discuss was the call in and the ability for the pre-agenda and the agenda. I think the timing of the board meeting can be much more flexible as long as we continue to allow that call and queuing.
Okay, and right now, the policy as drafted is silent on the issue, which I think is the way it should be. Again, it leaves us the latitude. I hear your point, and you're probably right, but then there will be other people who, because they're working, calling in doesn't relieve the fact that they're at work. So I think we have some work to do in terms of deciding if we're going to change the time and how much we would change the time.
Right.
Anything else, Vice Chair? Vice Chair?
No, happy New Year to all.
I hope you're feeling better soon.
It hasn't broken yet, but it's better.
Okay. Okay, thinking of you. Been there,
Thank
not
you.
fun. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, very good. Meeting is now adjourned.
Chair,
Yes.
Chair,
Who's
over
that?
here.
Oh, yes.
I
Ms.
I
Fernandez.
did have one more policy.
Oh.
But it's just the BIE, which is
that's so
just a repeal. It's the one that I had said we should incorporate it into BDC. I just wanted to make sure that was covered.
I think we we understood that. Okay, next time I do an all call, jump up, throw something at me. Okay, we're done. Good deal. Oh, that's right, this is our first meeting of the year. Huh?